Okay, good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This shiur is sponsored graciously, anonymously for a Aliyas Neshama for Kehal Yedidim Bas Naftali Moshe and Aliyas Neshama for Naftali Moshe ben Elazar, as well as Yibal Mechaim or Refuah Shalema for Shmuel Yehuda ben Tzvi, as well as Daniel Avram and Shini Yehudis and Deborah Sarah Bas Miriam. The neshamos that were mentioned should have an aliyah, and Be'ezus Hashem, the names mentioned for Refuah Shalema should have Refuah Shalema B'Karo speedily B'Soch Shar Cholei Yisrael Be'ezus Hashem. So we jump back into Torah Zayin. Yesterday we spoke about the way in which the tzaddik's experience of nature, where we connected every aspect of nature to the tiferes that Hashem has, the pride that Hashem has, not just in Klal Yisrael as a general whole, and not just in each individual Jew befrat, but pratis within each and every Jew, every aspect of nature, within every creature, or every individual creation, within creation as a whole. Those two things mirror one another. And we spoke about how the tzaddik's discovery and the way that tzaddik lives conscious of all of those different facets of creation and the reflective nature of Klal Yisrael's specialness, of who Klal Yisrael are, how that causes for the revelation of Yira and Ava. And we gave the mashal. Rabbi Nachman spoke about a king on the Yom Genusia, on the day of the birth of his kingship, which he also called Yom Huledas HaMelech, but it meant, apparently in context, the birthday of the kingdom of the king. That on the one hand, the king walks out wearing his garments of the royal vestments, and that causes for a certain appreciation of the gravity in terms of the relationship that the king has with his subjects. And then he gives out all the different things that he wants to open the treasure house and to enjoy in that celebration, to enable the subjects to gain and to join in with him in his appreciation of his bounty and what he has. And those two things is Yira and Ava, and those two things are revealed by the tzaddik. And we said that basically, in order to really experience a genuine experience of Yiras Hashem and Avas Hashem, it comes back to pride. Right? That's what we said. Rabbi Nachman's Gilui is that it all begins with respect. This that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has pride in Klal Yisrael should immediately logically follow for there to be Yira, to appreciate the gravity of just what that relationship is, as well as the incredible tenderness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ava for each and every one of us, that He created us, brought us into being, and how much He believes in us and trusts that we're capable of changing the world in the way that He put us in this world to serve our role, right? As Klal Yisrael, with a very, very unique role among all the nations of the world, which we, again, discussed in many lessons prior, but specifically in Torah Zayin. And here we're going to get into that in a very incredibly deep way. All b'siyata d'shmaya. Says the Heiliger Rebbe. Let's jump in. We're at Ois Beis, and this is on page Chaf Beis Amud Beis. And says the tzaddik as follows: Ukeshenechshach eitzel echad hayira va'ava. What happens when a person discovers that his experience of Yira and Ava have become darkened? The Bechinas, as the pasuk in Shayahu says, Albish Shamayim Kadros. Let the skies cloak themselves in kadros, in darkness. V'sak asim ksusam, and I shall place sackcloth, as their covering. So what's this aspect? What does that mean? Shamayim, Zabechinas Eish Shamayim. We already learned in previous lessons that Shamayim is the aspect of Eish and Mayim. As Chazal tell us, the word Shamayim is a conjugation of those two words. And we know that Eish is always a symbol for Gevura. Mayim is the symbol for Chesed, and so Shamayim is the aspect of Chesed and Gvura. Says the pasuk in Yeshayahu, it is possible for Shamayim to become darkened. Albish Shamayim Kadros. That means that a person's Shamayim, the person's Eish and Mayim, can become darkened. V'sak asim ksusam, they can be covered over. Hainu Yira va'ava nislabshim b'kadros v'nechshachim v'neskasim b'sak. It is possible that a person's experience of Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, becomes covered over Much like we spoke about in Torah Aleph, where you could either live the Yaakov Avinu lifestyle, which really the whole Likutei Moharan is really about that, or Chas v'Shalom, the Hepech is the Esav lifestyle, where we have the Malchus, the Kedusha on the one hand, where the world is open as a portal to godliness. The world is the moon that's reflecting the light of the sun. Nature is seen as something which reveals Hashem as opposed to conceals Hashem. That's why it's called Olam, not because it hides Hashem, but because it is where God is hidden, right? And that's the aspect of the Malchus to Kedusha. And the moon that's reflective of the light of the sun, or it can be Lapech, it can be a Malchus to Sitra Achra, where it's a moon that's not reflecting anything, and that's the aspect of Esav. In that sense, the whole entire nature is cloaked. It's dark. It means it's not providing access to what it really holds, the secrets that it is protecting. And so that's the V'china of Albish Shamayim Kadras. Nature is closed up. Ava and Yira are closed up. A person is not really able to access that which he's in this world really to access. The only reason why there's a world in the first place is so that we can become aware of the presence of Hashem. That's so imminent, that's everywhere we look. If a person has those eyes to be able to see it. Says the Rebbe, when Yira and Ava sees in the heart of a person, it's very simply for one reason. How is it in the previous two SHIURIM that we've learned that a person can access Yira and Ava? Only one way. Rabbi Nachman said through the tzaddik. Memela, that means that all the while that a person's experience of connection to the tzaddik, guidance by the tzaddik, bringing into his own or her own very small brain the consciousness of the tzaddik, so then that's going to cause for Yira and Ava to become closed up. Zem machmas. This is due shenechshach etzlei ar hatzadik. This is due to the fact that the ar hatzadik, that the light of the lifestyle of the way that tzaddik is teaching us how to live, like we learned in Torah Aleph, as I meir loy hachachma v'aseichel sheish b'chol davar, right? The shemesh, where the whole world is illuminated. So the ar hatzadik becomes dim. From whom, like we said earlier, a person is supposed to receive the Yira and the Ava. Sometimes a person's super inspired, super connected. We spoke yesterday at length about his skashras to tzaddikim, which is like a central theme in maybe all of Rabbi Nachman's teachings, and what Breslov is really known for is the tzaddik, the tzaddik, the tzaddik. We spoke about it's a very nuanced, delicate concept. It took 60 SHIURIM to be able, to say what we said yesterday, because now we've sort of journeyed through it enough to be able to pick up on the nuances. What is the ar tzaddik? Otherwise, a very dangerous thing. Like we start to turn tzaddikim into chas v'shalom, something that they're never intended to be. We said ar tzaddik is the aspect of the way that tzaddik is enabling us to live. That it should be, our whole life should be ar, right? That's the ar tzaddik. That's the tzaddik providing us with the capacity to live a life of illumination. To live a life, like we spoke about in Torah Aleph, of light. Light connoting vibrance, connoting clarity, connoting life, like light, as opposed to darkness and hopelessness and so on. That's the ar tzaddik. And sometimes that shines for a person. Sometimes a person, like we said yesterday, believes in the tzaddik. They trust the tzaddik enough. I think we're commenting on the words, roya, right? He's roya. We can see it. We can feel it. And by virtue of a person's trust in the tzaddik, by virtue of a person's reliance on what the tzaddik is teaching, they really start to believe that this is what life is. And the aura of the tzaddik in that person's life is activated. And the mela that enables them to live with Yira and Ava, and they're plugged in. Sometimes it's possible that great light of the tzaddik's lifestyle becomes covered over, becomes darkened. There are periods, like we always learn in Torah Vav, of Ratz of Shayiv. Sometimes a person's going to be connected. Sometimes a person's going to be in a state of Aliyah, and many times not. And many times it's an experience of Yerida, of Shayiv. And it becomes impossible for that person to really connect. And they might read some nice things in a Breslov pamphlet somewhere, but it doesn't do anything for them. It's not, they think maybe it's childish, or they think it's naive, or they think whatever it is, but they're not in that state of trusting. They don't live with it. Something's closed off. There's a blockage. It can even be that a person is literally by the tzaddik. which is a very, there's a very prevalent and relevant quote oftentimes, with regard to going to Uman. People have all these hasagos, especially if it's a person's first time, and they prepare and they learn about it and they understand, and then you get there, and either because of the journey you're dead tired, because you didn't have any sort of frame of reference, or your expectations or person's expectations were not aligned with the reality, and it can be maddening that a person Daika feels the least connection in Uman. Very, 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 very common experience. I can tell you the amount of people that come over to me when I'm in Uman, when I'm privileged to be there, I already know. Can I speak to you for 5 minutes? This is what they're going to say. I know. It happens again and again and again. People are bewildered. Like, over here I'm having Yeridas. Like, over here I'm not connected. Over here I'm feeling sad. Like, what's pshat? And this Rabbi Nachman says it's possible. And there are other answers to give also. Over here, Rabbi Nachman just takes one approach. But the avshu eit salat tzaddik. It's possible for a person to be literally by the tzaddik. And it's possible that al b'shamayim kadras, the whole thing is darkened. It's nechshach etzloi, and something is dark, and they're not able to see it. They cannot taste and understand and see the great light that the tzaddik is bringing to the world, enabling us to live a life of light. They can't see it. They're incapable of seeing that it is only through the guidance and the lifestyle and the advice and the eitzah, again, not the person of the tzaddik. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, because the tzaddik has no person, like we've said now many times. The tzaddik is just an empty portal. The tzaddik is a doorway that leads to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and reveals Hashem's light in the world. So they don't understand that, it's daika through this tzaddik that they can access everything that they actually want. Sometimes you speak to people, who are dealing. It's a big issue today, I think. Speak with this word mental health problems has come to cover such a wide spectrum of different feelings. From schizophrenia, bipolar, and psychosis, which are like actual mental health problems, to just the slightest anxiety, that a teenage girl has. All of a sudden, boom. She has mental health issues, and now all of the TikTok videos of all these people, become relevant for her, and it's like a label, and this is what it is. And it's I was just telling somebody the other day, I don't know if anybody knows this, I thought it was fascinating and maybe frightening and certainly interesting and of note, that in 1950, the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of all the psychiatric or psychological disorders, at least in America, that's like the Bible. So like everybody has to find, a diagnosis from there. Guess how many pages it had in 1950? Can't make this stuff up. Do you know how many pages it had? How many pages of diagnosis? 40 pages. Do you know how many pages the DSM has now? How many 7 years later? Huh? 954. So
they're not all medical, physical.
No, not medical at all. Completely psychological. Like they pathologized every single aspect of the human experience. So everybody has mental health. So I think eventually they're going to just diagnose every single experience a human being could ever have, and then we'll just get rid of it and just say human, and we'll just put it under. So obviously, now again, like I mentioned earlier, there are actual mental health issues. There are people who suffer from clinical and so on and so on. Not taking away from that, and that's true. Whether that's a result of the culture and ways of thinking that actually end up leading to chemical imbalance, there's makom to think about that and wonder, what the correlation is. But I'm leaving that aside for now.
Can we just roll back 1 second? You talked
Sure.
about over 4.
Yeah.
I imagine that you're referring to the Pneumius, right? You made reference to the fact that yesterday you touched on a lot that Chatzonius is not really something at all which is relevant. Yeah. But Chatzonius is a very big factor in the Jewish world.
Yes.
So how does that with the Hashem and everything else? So how do they marry with each other? What's the origin? How does that go? Because everyone is putting a label or putting a box or putting something based on the levush. So how does that? So
I'm not sure if it's exactly relevant to this point. I'm happy to discuss that. And maybe if we have 2 minutes at the end of the year, we'll get to that. But right now we're just focused on one particular point with regard to this nikuda of darkness. I'm totally lost, not because of you. It's time I lost the train of thought. Mental health. Because people are convinced that the only way to get help for their emotions and their feelings has to be from secular literature in the secular world, it's like you can literally come to a person and say, this is everything you need. Like it's really everything you need, and it will improve the way that you live. It'll really address your issues. And it's like, no, nechshach etzlei ar tzadik. And this is how it is. Sometimes it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a fact. Sometimes we've been so hurt religiously that it's like, and it was like this for me for a very long time, and even sometimes it still is. You can have the same thing from a rabbi and a guru, and when the guru says it, it's effective. When the rabbi says it, it doesn't impact me. You know, it's like it really is true. People are much more likely to listen to the very same guidance from a therapist, and then it's like effective because like they paid $150 for an hour, and someone told them like to to like do mindfulness, because that's really what it is. Like that's what therapists are telling people today. I know, I was in therapy and that's what I was told. So I said, okay, I could have saved the money and I could have went on YouTube and looked up a 10-minute, that's what he told me to do anyway. So like what's the, or you can go to tzaddikim who are literally telling you the very same things. Oftentimes, especially in today's therapeutic world, where like the alignment is shocking. The alignment is shocking. All the therapists came around to tell people the same exact things Rabbi Nachman's telling them. Just Rabbi Nachman has the advantage that he doesn't work within a secular system, so he doesn't have to tell you, he doesn't have to leave out God. Like Rabbi Nachman could link it back to the truth of the Ikra v'Shar Shadikula Almin. But Nechshach Etzleinu Ar Tzaddik, that's what it means. The light of the tzaddik is dark by a person. And no, that's not going to help me. That's just, that's some religious thing. Meanwhile, some therapeutic theory that, replaced the previous one from 15 years ago and will probably itself be replaced in another 15 years, and so on and so forth. That's like Torah and Hashemayim. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's a fact. And that's the reality that we live in, because Nechshach Etzleinu Ar Tzaddik. And that can be, like, even though you can tell a person, Yuchal level Tachlis HaTayv, literally follow this advice, speak to Hashem, etc., etc., etc. No, that not. Because the light of the tzaddik is darkened. Like we find by Ephron Achiti, Shemekayim Ma'aras HaMachpelah, Shushar Gan Eden. The Zohar Kodesh teaches that the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, which is literally the gate to Gan Eden, that all the souls rise up to Shemayim through the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And there's an incredible light by the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, as everybody knows. What a thing to daven at the place of Avram. It's like, you ever think about that? Like, this is actually where Avram Avinu is, under this ground. Like, he's here. He's in this. Avram Avinu, the father of monotheism. Where 7 out of 8 billion whatever people in the world are living their life based, in some sense, on Avram Avinu. Like, it's just remarkable. It's what an incredible world. It's incredible. So a person stands there at the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, Oyrei Gadol Ma'od, what a light. And if Alpikin Etzloi, obviously, to Ephron Achiti, he sold it away for nothing. How are you selling that away? You having your property, the gate to Gan Eden. But it was dark. The Zohar Kodesh says for Avram it was lichtig. Avram appreciated it. For Ephron it was cheap. It was like Mamash going back to Yaakov and Esav. Yeah, Esav selling away the Bechira. Esav selling away, something eternal, and because it was dark. He got rid of it super joyously. The same is true. When the light of the tzaddik is darkened by a person, the tzaddik's light is shining. The tzaddik teaches us how to live in kol ha'olamais, in a way of ar, in a way of light, in a way of simcha, in a way of clarity, in a way of elevation, in a way of tikkun, in a way of mamish. Hashem gave us everything we need, especially in Rabbi Nachman. It's like a big, great therapist. The afal pikin etzle in a meir klal. But that person has no chance of connecting to it because it's dark for them. They're totally turned off by anything they hear of Breslov, anything they hear about Chabad, anything they hear about Ishbitz, whatever it is. Dark. This is often the result, says the Rebbe, of achiras hamaisim, of muddied actions, uksilas haseichel, and a brain that isn't functioning properly. That with enough experience of a certain kind of action, that's going to close up certain doors for you. Not for you, for all of us. A person's mind becomes closed up with a certain ksilas. They're not able to hear the truth. They're not able to appreciate and to onboard the truth. A person spends a lot of time thinking different ways and thinking within secular frameworks, distant from Hashem, and not really understanding with emunah, like we had learned in Torah, hey, chachmos that have to do with oneness, chachmos that increase a person's emunah. But the opposite, a person can have an experience where chachamim heimel ra, where their chachma is all associated with ra, with breaking off, fragmenting off of the oneness of Hashem, and therefore lehetiv lo yadau, then they don't know a good thing. It really means they don't know how to do good, right? So they chachamim heimel ra, they can use their intellect to plan all kinds of terrible things, but lehetiv lo yadau. Rabbi Nachman interprets it that when chachamim heimel ra, when a person's using their chachma for not a good thing, then lehetiv lo yadau, then they don't know good. They can't appreciate sweetness and goodness. They're incapable of using their brain to really be able to understand the depth and the goodness and the value and the benefit and the gift of the Torah of the tzaddik. When a person's seichel is muddied, when a person's mind is coarse and corporeal, when a person's they're not yet at a place where they're sick of their entrenchment in physicality and looking to get free, they're enjoying it still quite a bit, so they're not at a place where the tzaddik is going to be able to help a person. Like Rabbi Nachman said in Sichos Ran, I think I mentioned it prior, 2 teachings. Number 1, the tzaddik says that the minute that somebody comes to me, I already know every aspect of their personality, from their foot to their head, which is the whole mikaf regel ad rosh, every part of the person he knows already, even without the person saying anything, and this was seen by the Rebbe millions of times. And then Rabbi Nachman also says in Sichos Ran, I can only help a person who comes to me and tells me what he lacks. So how does that work? Why does Rabbi Nachman need the person to tell him what they lack if he already knows everything? And the answer is, it's not for him, it's for that person. Because the thing that makes it possible for a person to grow, and this is also true therapeutically, after I just spoke pretty harshly about that realm, but I didn't mean to. I think it's just got to be a balance. But we know therapeutically is that rock bottom is the first thing that's required. You cannot talk to a person who's not in a growth orientation. It's not possible. It's not there because they don't want it. And if you can't force somebody else to grow, not for real. You can force someone to act like they're growing, but that's not of any value. Because what we really need is that a person should be in a state where they themselves are ready to grow. But if a person their seichel is stuck, and they're not ready and willing to work, and they're not ready and willing to really open up and onboard new perspectives and really change, even if they're saying it with their mouth, but if they're not really ready, which usually demonstrates itself in a willingness to try whatever it's going to take. It means desperation. It means a person is sick and tired. Like Reb Kook uses a lashon in the beginning of Aras HaTshuva, gil nefesh. Like a person is a person is nauseous. Like mamish knows they're physically ill from the way they've been living, and they're done. They're finished. Until a person's at that point, then nechshach etzloid, because their seichel is in ksilos and they're stuck in a cycle of behavior that they're not ready to lift their head above the water. So that's a big issue, right? And if Torah Zayin ended there, we'd be finished, right? Rabbi Nachman's derech is he always presents a problem, and then he immediately is presenting the tikkun all the time. So Ois Gimel v'hatikun lazeh. This is super, super crucial. V'hatikun, how do you fix this? Lahachnia ulevatel ksilas haseichel. How could a person begin to fix their way of thinking so that it should become porous enough for the light of the tzaddik to be able to filter through? How does a person get to that place? Hu al yedei bechinas mizbeach. Says the Rebbe, it's through the aspect of the mizbeach. What does this mean? The Zohar Kadosh tells us that ki ikr yenikas haksilos, the primary source from which foolishness draws its life force, dainu klipas, which is the klipas, which are, I think, maybe our first time encountering the word klipas. I think in this context, klipa means a shell, right? Or like a peel, really. And that's what the aspect is of a fruit. You take an orange is a very good example. The klipa is mamish connected to the orange, or an apple, where it's even more closely connected. And the whole thing of a peel is that it has a dual function, right? On the one hand, it protects the fruit, and that's really why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in nature that a fruit should have a peel, because an orange falls from a tree and it's not ruined, right? It has like armor, it has built-in armor. But also from the standpoint of a person who's trying to access the fruit, the klipa is a covering. It conceals. Klipa means to hide. When we speak about klipos, like they're not demonic forces. They are forces that hide. That's what a klipa is. It's a shell. It covers over. Klipos are aspects that come to conceal the interiority, the panemias, who come to conceal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in various aspects of life. And that's what a person's dealing with. Klipos means they're stuck in the realm of concealment. They only see the shell. They don't access the fruit, and certainly not the seeds. Right? A person's locked out. That's what a klipa is. Says Rabbi Nachman, ksilos, folly, which is the hainu klipos, which is an Esav lifestyle, the Esav consciousness of seeing only the externality of the world and not being able to live b'pnimius, like we've discussed so many times in our journey thus far. Hurak mebechinas mizbeach. That's what the Zohar says. It comes from the aspect of the mizbeach. The mizbeach is malchus. What's the aspect of the mizbeach? Says the Rebbe. How does that translate? Hainu bechinas achila. It all has to do with eating, the Rebbe says. Kishulchana shel adam, the Gemara in Brachas tells us, a person's table is mechaper kimizbeach. A person's table atones for that person like a mizbeach. Umisham ikar yinikasam, and from there, the klipos have their primary life force. And this is the aspect Rabbi Nachman is telling us of a person's mizbeach. It all has to do with how a person eats. And this is like a sort of a sore topic in the frum world, because like it's such an issue, right? And our culture, I think, naturally lends itself, to eating. What can you do? Shabbos, it's like Shabbos and Pesach. I'm like Haman told Achashverosh, every day is a different holiday, and we enjoy our food, and we're a people who we serve Hashem through food. And a person has a simcha every other night, and the whole thing is food. We really have a major food issue in our community. It's not a joke. It's very severe. It's very serious. We have a major food issue, but nobody talks about it because it's mutter, and it's kosher food, and it is an aspect and an experience which has so much to do with the spirit of the law as opposed to the law, that there are so many other things that people would rather focus on that are mamas, we're talking about like mutter aser. Over your food is not mutter aser. It's just like, so it's kosher, and you understand it's such a panemius thing, eating. It's such a panemius because it's not black and white. On the level of black and white is white. Meaning on the level of kosher or puzzle mutter aser, it's kosher and it's mutter, and it's oftentimes even a mitzvah. But in Rabbi Nachman, who cares about avoda, he focused on eating a tremendous amount.
He was very slight, though.
Rabbi Nachman was super slight, very slight. But that was because he was very sickly. He was very ill. But Rabbi Nachman focused so much. We're going to see again and again in the sefer, achila. And therefore he says, V'al kain, afilu achar achilas ish hakosher. Even after we eat a holy person. That was a joke. Even after a holy person eats, right? Rabbi Nachman is not advocating for cannibalism, chas v'shalom, right? Even if it happens to be kosher food, like an isha kosher. So, after a holy person eats, he says, even a tzaddik who eats, eating, just drags a person down. Like someone pointed it out to me once. He said, look at the difference. Even by tzaddik, I say tzaddikim, I don't know, ish kosher. I'm not mamish tzaddikim. He said, look at even a regular, ish kosher, who's eating in a holy way. Look at the difference between the way he makes the bracha rishona and the bracha achrona. Right? Usually we make our bracha rishona loud and excited, and shakol, and then our bracha, he said, look what eating does to a person. All right, it's just the eating that because eating is such a physical thing. Eating is such an egotistical thing, b'shayrish, because that means that you're taking an entity that was previously outside of you and you're literally consuming it. Like it's now become part of me. Like it's like if a person goes through life with the eating consciousness, then everything around them is just, it's an extension of them. Right? It's just like the definition of egoism, right? And it's a lack of respect for the autonomy and and the value of other people and other things and a person just eating, just consuming everything. So that's going to entrench a person down in the world of physicality. So he says, even by a kosher, like an ish kosher, even by a person who's eating properly, it is absolutely certain that there's going to be some slight bilbul adas. Their brain is a little bit heavier. They feel a little bit more tired and so on. This is what eating, and even holy eating, again, he's saying good eating does to a person. This is because whether a person has a clear mind, and not just the ability to think properly, but a person has a clear mind to see the truth of this world, to see the panemius, to live in R, or chas v'shalom, the opposite, all depends on how a person eats, what a person eats, when a person eats. Rabbi Nachman says, listen, and do yourselves a favor. Don't give extra vitality to the klipas. What's the point? Give it just what it needs, meaning keep yourself alive, right? And give and behecher, not more. Then when a person's own shulchan, and it goes along with pride, a person respects themselves, they respect what they do. They realize your eating is not stam eating because you're not stam. That means that your table is not a stam table. A person's table is a mizbeach because you're a kohen gadol. In Hashem's eyes, you're mamlechas kohanim. It goes back to what we had talked about before. You have a mission. Hashem created you for a particular hisparus, and you're supposed to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's glory from behind a certain aspect of nature in a way that no Jew before you ever did, and no Jew after you ever will. Memela, that should lead to a certain respect for everything that you do. It's not stam. Every food that a person eats, kimizbeach. And if it's kimizbeach, and a person really thinks that this is avodas Hashem, what am I bringing on my altar? What am I offering up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Is this a refined food? Is it a holy food? How is it being offered? Am I eating it in a refined way, in a holy way, in a conscious way? And these are madrigas. These are very high madrigas because this is a very, 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 we're entrenched in this from, way before birth. Like this is, it's like we're born with like gefilte fish in one hand and cholent in the other hand. Like we're from birth. It's like we're stuck, and it requires a tremendous amount of mindfulness to first become conscious of the fact that like when we eat, like we can even be conscious and not just totally in it, and that a person can eat in such a way, says the Rebbe, that it should be kimizbeach, and then when that happens. That the eating not just is kosher food, but that the experience of eating has a hechsher. It's not so much about what the hechsher the food has. What hechsher does the eating of the food have? Does it have a hechsher? So because the food could be kosher, but the way that we eat the food could be totally treif, and we don't think about that.
It's permitted indulgence. That's really what you're saying. The subconscious of it all is that it's permitted indulgence in our.
But the indulgence is a bechina, oftentimes like the Ramban says, novel versus HaTorah, where the indulgence itself is totally out of character, of what the Torah is trying to turn us into. So the what's that?
That's below the surface, but on the surface is deemed as permitted indulgence.
Nachon, because it's permitted.
Right.
And that's what we're saying. That's why it's not an issue that you're going to see anybody writing a Mishpacha magazine, because it's totally kosher, and these are good Jews, and they're going to go to Olam Haba, and everything's fine. Like but Rabbi Nachman wants not just that a person should be ticking the boxes and living a kosher Jewish life. The Rebbe wants that a person should be mamish a tzaddik. The Rebbe is not sufficing with just like doing the thing. So he's saying it's not just about the hechsher on the food, which is totally important. It's about the hechsher on the eating, and for that you need something that's kedoshim to you, right? Kedoshim. That's up. That's the issue. Yeah, double punch. That's the nekuda.
So the Rebbe's operation of the food is very different, right? So
what's that?
He didn't eat his food properly.
It's not what he's saying. No, it's not what he's saying.
Not on his level.
Not on his level. I mean, this that the Rebbe didn't eat his food properly, I think you're referring to when Rabbi Nachman was a son, was a boy, and he wouldn't chew his food, right? I think I mentioned when he was 6 years old, he was taking his food and breaking it into, I guess, smaller pieces and putting it right down his throat so he wouldn't get any taste. He didn't want to have any hana from the food. He was 6, So that's that's not what he's talking about. That's a hoich madrega. All he means to say, eat kosher food, eat it joyously with Hashem, with Hashem's presence, and in quantities that are not the bechina of gluttony. That's it. A person's allowed to enjoy a person, but the nakuda is, what is our consciousness when we're eating it? What's our consciousness? There are even those who are on a madrega, and I do believe that it's a madrega, and it's something actually, whatever, I don't want to hold myself by it, but it's something I eventually aspire to. But there, I don't know if there are people in this room, but there's a person in this room who's so careful about what he eats that he from the time he's very young, has not eaten any meat. Not eat any meat. Because of a certain compassion. It's a very, very deep thing. Rav Kook writes that la'asad lavai, that's how it's going to be. That's how it was originally supposed to be. In the beginning of creation, only to Noach was mutter. But really, everything's going to go back to the way it was, just plants. Rav Kook goes so far as to say, you have to see it inside, it's shocking. Rav Kook goes so far as to say that la'asad lavo, in the third Beis HaMikdash, the karbanos are going to be plants. He says. Animals.
Shimon Moshe was actually vegan.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
all his guest houses are giving all the.
Yeah, the guest houses.
Everything. But he himself.
They didn't take the whole Messiah. They
himself,
took the eating Messiah and the feeding Messiah, but of what they're eating and feeding and something else. But this is a high madrega. That means that a person's conscious. That means that that every time this particular individual sits down to eat a meal, there's holiness there already, because there's a certain consciousness behind it. There's a certain concern, compassion, care. It's a high madrega. It's an incredibly high madrega. And that person, I believe, is refined as a result of that. Because there is a certain taiva there. I'm sure he feels it like anybody else. I'm not so sure, actually, after all these years. But, there's a certain taiva that a person feels. And if we're being totally honest with ourselves, we make fun of all the vegans, Okay, tachlis, what do you turn into when a person puts a steak in front of you? You know what I'm saying? Like, with all the jokes. Do we have the wherewithal to hold back? These are things to think about. And again, Chas v'Shalom is all in the context of pride and beauty and glory. We're talking about a madrega that Chas v'Shalom shouldn't feel ashamed or upset about ourselves. Oh my gosh, I really struggle with this. It's okay. It's no, in Rabbi Nachman, it's not. There's no pressure. But the Rebbe wants to raise our sights. The Rebbe wants to let us know, like he's just here to diagnose. To really diagnose. We're talking about, the DSM. Rabbi Nachman's giving us this diagnosis. He's saying, really, it has to do with how you eat. As he's not blaming or shaming. He's just saying this is the fact.
Is that the Masim Rhyme that he was mentioning at the top?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it could be. It could be one of the Maisim Rhyme. And the Rebbe says over there, he says, yes, through Maisim Rhyme, Neschashich Sichla B'Ksilas. Actually, I take it back. I said no. I think yes. I think yes. I think that this, therefore, since it immediately follows with this Maisa Ra'ah, so to speak, then this, or I would say this is one of them, because he says Maisim Ra'im. This is one of them, perhaps the primary, of those that can cause a seichel that's not miyushav. It's not miyushav. And I'll say, Yeah, I'll tell you that I think also it's reasonable because our whole vitality in this world comes from food. So it's reason to believe that the way that we engage with the food is going to literally impact the way that we function. Okay? This is because it's our vitality. It's everything we have. I was reading an incredible book. This incredible lady who wrote two books. Leonardo, I'll send the links to the chat. They are incredible books. She's the mother of a very, very dear friend of mine, Aryeh Shirshau. And she's a very special lady. She lives in Tzfas, and amazing. And she wrote 2 books on eating, mindful eating. And in the introduction to one of the 2 books, she writes over there this incredible thing that if you think of it, and this is true at least maybe for most, and there are exceptions to the rule, but eating for a baby, which is its first frame of reference, is literally an intimate connection, not just with food, because there are some people who have formula, and again, what impact or lack of impact, I don't know, I don't care right now, that's not what I'm talking about, that's okay. But for a baby who's breastfed, a baby who's naturally feeding from its mother, it is a relational experience. It's not the food is coming from a person, from a being. She calls it there's an intimacy of eating. And that's a baby's first frame of reference. And then as we grow up and we become weaned off of natural feeding and we start to eat, we we can come into an experience of like doing violence to the food. Like we have no relationship with it. There's no relationship. There's no intimacy there. There's no tenderness. There's no appreciation. There's no emotion. There's no love. There's just consuming. It's like a totally oppositional experience to that of what eating used to be or what eating really is for babies. An incredible thing. I never thought of that before I read that. Imagine if every time we sat down to eat, we felt like we were nursing. We felt the presence of a being who was giving us this food. We felt the warmth, like she explains, like the baby's enveloped by the mother, and like oh my gosh, like that's what eating is supposed to be. Imagine that. If we ate in such a way, and again, these are madrigas. It could take years to get to that. I'm super distant from this. I have it somewhere foggy, hovering over my brain. Like this is an ideal, but like. It's extraordinarily difficult for me, and I'm sure for many of us. I think Rav Guy could give us all some comments and guidance, right? Oh, no pun on the word guidance. He can give us some of his guidance on eating, because he's mamish an expert on also how to eat properly.
You are what you eat comes from here.
Yes, pretty much. Right, mamish. So we have examples to look up to. We have examples of people who know how to do it healthfully. The pleasure of eating.
In English, I posted it after.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I personally printed it, room bound it, and it's stunning.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous. Okay, so let's go back inside. So this is what the Rebbe is saying. Then he says, Hainu. Sha'achila b'kashrus karai, when a person is eating with a hechsher, let's say, right? Eating with a hechsher, not just food, with a hechsher, but eating. Azay nechnoi maklipas. Then the concealing forces are subjugated, axilas, and it doesn't prevent the person multiple times a day from forgetting about Hashem. You give the klipas what they need to exist for the purpose of bechira, but it's not overpowering. Because the klipas have to get some energy from us. But we don't feed them too much. You feed them enough to keep them alive, not too much. Isn't that a beautiful achila b'kashrus? And he doesn't mean achila b'kashrus like the food is kosher. He means the achila needs a hechsher. Nichna aksilos. So it's like the poskim, their job is to give a hechsher on the food. The Hasidic Rebbes, their job is to give a hechsher on the eating. It's a different hechsher. It's a different badatz. It's a different thing. Nichnak is when nisroimim aseichel. Wow, what a lashon! A person's seichel could be nisroimim. Not just that a person isn't in ksilos, a person's seichel can actually be elevated. Kamashimitzina b'Gemara, as the Gemara says in Baba Kama, Ayin Beis and Aleph, and it goes on to the Amma Beis there. Baba Aya the Baal Rava, Reb Nachman, Rava asked Reb Nachman a whole deep question with regard to Choshev Mishpat, and he answered him what he answered him. And Letzafra, in the morning, he came back to him. He said, totally discount what I told you last night. He said, I take it back. Amarle, he says, I made a mistake. And the reason why I didn't say this to you last night, this answer, is because I hadn't yet eaten my ox meat. Okay, over here it's not such a vegan source. But over here he says, I hadn't eaten my steak. And therefore, but whatever it is, Rabbi Nachman says, you see that eating can prevent a person from having clarity. A person can gain clarity from that. Ninsa, because the person hadn't eaten, his brain wasn't clear. When his gadol haseichel, I just want to tell you a huge hashgacha. What's that?
He hasn't.
I hasn't. Yeah, that's what I said. I think.
It means eating makes him more clarity.
That's right. Eating can bring a person clarity. Eating properly can nisroim maseichel. The Rebbe said earlier that if a person eats shaloi b'kashrus, then it can be what's it called. So it's a delicate balance. You have to eat, and you have to eat b'kashrus. When you eat b'kashrus, asay toiv, it nisroim maseichel. When a person is not eating properly, then it's very bad, and then it can cause the opposite. So there's really no middle of the ground. Like eating can either be tremendous experience of dveikus, or chas v'shalom the opposite. And we had this incredible hashgacha again with this chabura again and again and again. Yesterday, I have a chat with some chavra, if anybody's interested. A little bit nervous to do this actually because it's a very public forum now and hundreds of people. So there's a certain group which is discussing certain matters with regard to Avodas Hashem. that I have for many, many years. If anybody's interested in joining, you can message me privately, and I'm happy to. It's already grown quite big, but it's like mamish, very, very particular and very special. Baruch Hashem. It's mamish a virtual-based medrash. And just yesterday, they were having a whole huge debate that sometimes happens because different kinds of Yidden, but it's very beautiful. And I'm sort of the admin, so I make sure what's going on there, and that things stay within a certain boundary, which is I think what provides it the proper tzura. There was a whole conversation about a certain minig of a certain chasidus that's became like anhaga to eat before davening, to eat before davening, and the whole thing, what it says in Lubavitch. This is a anhaga, where they're much more open about it, and the question was, what exactly did Lubavitch Rebbe mean? When he said, was it a rasha for a yachid? Was it a general thing? What kind of eating did he mean? How much eating did he mean? For how long? Is it only for people who are learning Hasidus before davening late for that reason, or people rolling out of bed at 9, eating for an hour and then davening at 10? Like, what's the what did he mean? What is the nekuda? There's a whole conversation about that, eating before davening, eating after davening, because the Rebbe held that in this generation all of us are chaylim in a certain sense, and it's better to eat, and so that you can daven instead of davening, so that you can eat. There's a whole huge, and our mevinim, I'm telling you, this chat is like people who are bikiyim in it's a wild thing. It's a beautiful thing. Very, very proud of it and grateful for it. And that was the discussion yesterday. What does eating do? Does eating help? Does eating hurt? And then last night I opened the Likutei Moharan to take a look at what we're going to be learning today, and boom, like Al Yedei Sha'achal, because Rabbi Nachman was very strict on eating before davening. That's why there was sort of a tension. Rabbi Nachman says that he never, even in Shulchan Aruch, it's totally mutter, and beyond that, even to have coffee. The question is with sugar, without sugar, and so on. But Rabbi Nachman never said in his life he never drank water before davening. Like, he was super makbid. And also in Breslov it's different because they daven very early, and the whole thing is different. It's not, you can't compare one to the other. But we were wondering, what would Rabbi Nachman say about this? And I opened it up, and I posted to the chat. I said, can't make this stuff up. This is exactly where we're up to. That because you see, Nimsa shal yedei shaloi achal loy haisa daita tzlula. Like, see, Rabbi Nachman agrees that if a person's going to be in a state where they need daita tzlula, so because they didn't eat, he'd had daita tzlula. Like, what are the chances that would be the like a huge thing in my day? And then that night I open it up, and unbelievable, unbelievable. Okay, it's a big discussion. How many mezainas, how many regalach does a person need that they should be, etc. Okay, Kehal Yedidim achila, but Kehal Yedidim achila, that through the eating nichna ksilos when is gadol haseichel aval. And I think this is also a point that is relevant to the conversation. Here's also a point that's relevant. Aval kisha oichel kizoyle v'soive. When a person eats in a gluttonous way, where the mizbeach is no longer a mizbeach, it's nothing's being offered up, it's just sitting there. Then the klipas are drawing much more than they're supposed to. And so who knows if all of the issues in the firm world, which have to do with consciousness and etc., are just linked to eating. Who knows, maybe we should put all of our money, and not solve all the shidduch crises and everything else, just to address how Jews eat. Maybe that's the ikar. All of our addictions and all of our anxieties and depression, everything else. Maybe everything comes from how we eat, which causes us to think in a certain way or not in a certain way, and causes us to be closed up from the tzaddik. And who, what I'm saying? As I mentioned it earlier, we know so little about the way that things actually work that who knows if we're focusing on symptoms or causes, or who things are so complicated. I think I mentioned that in the context of kiruv, right? And how to bring people close, that whether it's active or certain other experiences which memela draw people close. It's so hard to know. But that's what the Rebbe says. When a person eats properly, the klipas are subjugated. The Gemara in Tzvachim tells us that the Mizbeach was in the chelek of Binyamin, who's called Binyamin Ze'ev Yitrof, right? This wolf that is torif. Torif means to tear. It's very possible the English word tear comes from tear, right? Torif. Zebechinas teref nasan li'areyav. It can mean to tear off, to rip apart, but it could also mean food. Teref nasan li'areyav. You've given out teref. You've given out sustenance li'areyav to those who fear Hashem. Bechinas achila bekashrus. That teref nasan liyareyav, that when a person has teref in a holy way, mizbeach mechalko shel teref, that leads to yireyav, that leads to yiras shamayim, that leads to avas Hashem. Through this, we can subjugate and get rid of the klipas. I know it's a klipas v'aksilas. But if a person's eating in such a way where it's the pigam of the mizbeach, hainu pigam ha'achila, al yidei zeh noisein koyach l'ksilos. This actually gives life to the ksilos, gives it energy, causes a person to become darkened and tired and not with energy and not with clarity and not with joy and feeling full of oneself, right? Full of oneself, feeling arrogant and egoistic and like a Baal Taiva, and we just don't feel good. We know that. We don't feel good. It's fun for the minute, but afterwards we don't want to feel that way. So that's why I said it's like rock bottom, where you realize, like, I don't actually enjoy this feeling. You know, it's like a total brainwashing. Like, I don't like it. They're telling me that it's good, but I don't feel good. So, like, we make the decision. It's not like, oh, because Rabbi Nachman told me I have to be careful. I don't want it myself. And until a person comes to that realization, in afechad, like, no one's going to help them. No one's going to be able, until they come and we come to our own understanding, this is not something I want anymore. And a person rectifies their mizbeach, then they're good. But that's going to contribute to this darkened brain. From toref, which is the food, which is the mizbeach and the chalka shel toref, can turn into either teref, nasan liyareyav, it could be a very, very good thing, a portal to yiras shamayim, or it can be teref hadas. Teref hadas means it can just completely disorient a person's mind. Hashem should help us to be mindful of Ezras Hashem as we begin meals today, whether a person's still eating before davening, wink wink, or a person's going to daven and then eat. Whenever a person eats today, Hashem should bless me and all of us, that we should do so mindfully, keeping this in mind, and take this on in some way to just open up the sugya in our brain to think about what are tikkunim I can make in this way. I'm eating kosher food that's beautiful. Does my eating have a hechsher? Hashem should bless us that our eating should have a hechsher, and the Arat Tzaddik should be available to us to live happily, healthily, connected to Hashem the whole time. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. I got very hungry now.
It's the Zayin before davening.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני